October 29, 1943. There has been a strong resurgence of the Mafia since the invasion of Sicily. It has grave implications for the present and the future.
We, at the present time, can claim the Mafia. A bargain has been struck.
The Mafia wishes to adhere with perfect loyalty and in a secret way to the political wishes.
The bargain once made here is not easily broken.
Mafia had nothing to do whatsoever with the invasion of Sicily. And I challenge anybody that asserts that to provide any evidence.
We used the Mafia the same way they were trying to use us.
What choice did you have? Anything that you could exploit in the hope of defending America and furthering what it was doing and might do.
Since World War II, a criminal organization has murdered thousands of people in Sicily. But 50 years ago, during World War II, the Americans made that organization their secret ally. This is the story of a pact between the United States and the Mafia. In 50 years, Sicily has come to the brink of chaos. There are soldiers on the streets of Palermo. Politicians and judges live in fear of their lives, in fear of the Mafia. At the top of the Mafia's hit list is Leoluca Orlando. He is the leader of a popular opposition determined to break the Mafia's stranglehold in Sicily. One by one, he has seen his colleagues murdered.
I want to scream to the world that the first victims of Mafia are Sicilians. Sicilians pay the highest cost to the Mafia organization. Don't forget. I want to say to the Americans that Americans had great responsibility for the strength of the Mafia. It is the reason for which I said to the Americans, study your history, because your history is our history.
Sicily is a superstitious society. So used to death, it has made a cult of it. In the catacombs beneath Palermo, the obsession is on display. The Mafia always kill those who stand in their way. For them, killing is a matter of honor. On this perverse code, they have built a secret empire. But 70 years ago, the Mafia was all but broken by a man who vowed to meet force with force. In May 1924, Benito Mussolini made his first state tour of this fiercely independent island. He came with dreams of unifying Italy and found the Mafia in his way. Independent and proud, the Mafia were an obstacle to his ambition for total power. He dispatched his iron prefect, Cesare Mori, to begin the repression. Within the new fascist order, Mori was given a free hand. To subdue the Mafia, he had a simple creed: to be more mafioso than the mafiosi. Mori cast a wide net to catch the Mafia in its Sicilian heartland. His method was the retata, or mass arrest. At the campaign's height, in January 1926, the greatest operation took place in the mountainous Madonia. Mori came to the notorious mafia town of Ganji.
Non è che erano bambini, non è che possiamo dire che il paese era tutto un coordinato di fascisti e carabinieri.
E che veniva a guardare qua sopra le gente, per vedere che i carabinieri, Calo non c'era.
E dove erano le persone?
Erano nel paese.
Erano dentro le case.
Le case, se io in campagna o così, in campagna tornavo.
No one could enter the town and no one could leave. Whole families were taken hostage to bring the mafia bosses out of hiding.
E da presi i parenti per far rappresentare tutti questi delinquenti, diciamo così. Poi in caserma l'hanno bastonato, l'hanno fatto dai torture, che le volevano parlare, per farle parlare in caserma, ci davano da bere acqua e cossale, così ci bruciava, ma non hanno arrestato. Hanno mandato ai confini per 5 anni, o era o non era, ci hanno dato i confini, o era o non era.
Mori drove on through the towns and villages of western Sicily. Crowds heard him denounce the evils of the mafia wherever he went. In total, Mori made 11,000 arrests in Sicily. Mussolini's crusade struck at every level of the mafia, even the previously untouchable capi, the men at the very top of the criminal hierarchy. Don Calogero Vizzini was one of them, a powerful capo rapidly rising within the mafia. His power base was the central Sicilian town of Villalba. Here he was known as Don Calo.
Era semplicemente ubbidito, era tenuto dai suoi nemici, dai suoi avversari. Visto dall'esterno era un distinto signore di campagna, non bestemmiò mai, diceva il rosario con i fratelli preti. Nel suo interno, nella sua attività, fu uno dei peggiori criminali che siano mai esistiti in Sicilia.
But even Don Calo Vizzini could not escape Mori's rough justice. First arrested, he was then placed under confinement in his village. Nearby, another influential capo, Don Giuseppe Genco Russo, was imprisoned for 3 years for mafia crimes. Mussolini's crackdown was world news. The man who made the trains run on time had now dared to take on the mafia, and won. The Times applauded Mussolini for attacking the monster in its native haunts and successfully throttling it. In New York, headlines declared, "The mafia is dead, a new Sicily is born." In reality, the mafia was not completely destroyed, but many mafiosi were in prison and many more were lying low in the isolated hill towns. Mussolini's purge had weakened the mafia as never before. On the 10th of June 1940, Italy entered the war. It heralded a reversal of fortune. To Mussolini it would bring defeat, but 4,000 miles away the mafia would find a lifeline when they needed it most.
Remember the United States in 1940? The lights were bright. The Brooklyn Dodgers had a good team. There was a bumper crop in the wheat states. There were a lot of automobiles.
To generations of Italians, the United States seemed a land of plenty. By 1940, more than 500,000 Sicilian immigrants had arrived to make a new life in America. With them came the mafia. Mafiosi soon found a place in the major crime syndicates, which the public were told were undermining the moral foundations of America.
In the last few years, the power of gangdom reached such an estate that the predominant emotion throughout the country was that of fear. the depredations of vicious outlaws roving from state to state like packs of wolves amounted to an actual armed invasion of America.
No punishment can be too severe for these public enemies. They deserve the whipping post or worse.
I'm not afraid to talk. I'll do all I possibly can to help the federal drive, to put the gunmen and the racketeer behind the bars where they belong.
Get these criminals behind prison walls. It's too bad that we even have to pay for their support. Their extermination would be much more satisfactory.
In America, as in Sicily, there was a war on crime.
Every shot hits the anatomy of that theoretical public enemy. He will kill and kidnap no more.
In New York City, public enemy number one and de facto head of the Mafia in America was Salvatore Lucania. Born in the center of Sicily, his roots were in the Mafia heartland attacked by Mori. Now in New York, he was better known as Charles Lucky Luciano. Newspapers called him the directing genius of organized vice. He was convicted on a charge of masterminding a prostitution racket, but the authorities knew that his guilt ran much deeper. Luciano was the godfather in one of New York's most brutal crime syndicates.
Program brought to you by Jell-O and Jell-O Pudding, starring Jack Benny.
Why are the Japs nervous, like a man on his way to the dentist to get a tooth pulled?
'Cause the Yanks are coming. Yahoo!
But the public enemy was changing. It was less than 3 months since Pearl Harbor. U-boats were operating within sight of New York Harbor.
Between the declaration of war, December the 7th, 1941, March of 1942, 151 merchant ships went down along the Eastern Sea frontier. We didn't know whether submarines were supplying them with additional fuel to stay in our waters. We didn't know what information was being conveyed, whether the fishing boats were bringing out fuel and intelligence. We didn't know. We had to find out.
The Navy focused its intelligence effort on the waterfront, but it was a world beyond the law. Its wharves and markets parceled out among New York's crime syndicates. One of these territories was Fulton Street Fish Market. Controlled by criminal racketeers, it was a no-go area for naval intelligence.
The police had never been able to really make a strong racketeering case against the waterfront. So the next best thing you could do is their cooperation as Americans.
Fulton Street Fish Market had its own allegiance. On the Lower East Side, it was one of Manhattan's most lucrative criminal empires, worked by Italian immigrants and dominated by the Mafia. Naval intelligence was uncertain where Fulton's loyalties lay. Fears of sabotage appeared to be dramatically confirmed on the 9th of February 1942, when the SS Normandy, being refitted as a troop ship, burst into flames and capsized at a West Side pier.
When I was detailed to head a team to investigate the Normandy fire, the first thought I had was, they succeeded. It's sabotage, because her speed could outrun any submarine that the Germans had. That was a terrible blow.
For New York naval intelligence, it was a decisive moment. Determined to infiltrate the waterfront, they set up a top-secret project. In charge was Charles Red Haffenden, an ex-private investigator admired for his imaginative approach to investigation. At a specially arranged meeting, naval intelligence sought the cooperation of the New York County District Attorney. He agreed to give the Navy access to criminal records on the Mafia.
Then came the second meeting, at which I was taken to develop a plan. How could we exploit anyone who had something to give to the war effort. And that's when the name of Sox Lanza came up.
Officially, the business agent of the United Seafood Workers, Joe Sox Lanza, was an underboss for Lucky Luciano and a man with a violent reputation.
Sox was a rough guy. He controlled the fish markets on the Lower East Side. He was a power. Nobody could sell fish without his approval. He probably shook him down, or he got paid off for protection or whatever. That's the kind of guy Sox was.
On March the 26th, 1942, naval intelligence took a decision whose repercussions would be felt far away in Sicily. They decided to ask Sox Lanza to collaborate with them. The meeting was so secret that it took place at midnight in a park on New York's Riverside Drive. Lanza was asked if he would assist the Navy. He simply replied, "I go along 100%. What Lanza, the market boss, hoped to gain from the collaboration is unclear, but he was under indictment and facing a jail sentence on an extortion charge. From his backstreet headquarters in Myers Hotel, Sox Lanza put the word out. The men on the waterfront beneath Brooklyn Bridge, the stevedores, longshoremen, and fishing crews were ordered to report anything suspicious.
What they could root out would be people who were sympathetic to the Axis powers. What they could do would put a lid on any of their activities, insofar as the loading of ships, or anything that had to do with keeping the lines open.
Well, what does putting a lid on mean?
Don't make any trouble. Don't make any trouble. You're healthy.
Haffenden was in constant contact with Lanza and was getting results. Lanza organized false union cards for Navy agents, smuggling them into bars, onto the piers, and aboard the ships. At Fulton Street, naval intelligence and the Mafia went into partnership. But Haffenden had ambitions beyond Fulton Street. He dreamt of expanding the project across the entire New York underworld. But Lanza's influence was limited. If Haffenden wanted more, he would have to go higher up. Lanza recommended a man who could deliver the whole of New York. He was state inmate number 92168, Lucky Luciano.
Lucky was a nice guy. The old-timers were well-behaved. They were not like the present mob. If Lucky walked on the street and he bumped into you, he'd apologize to you.
Luciano was over 300 miles from New York on the Canadian border in a maximum security prison nicknamed Siberia. Undeterred, Haffenden took a step closer to the heart of the Mafia. He decided to approach Luciano through his attorney. Polakov agreed to be involved in contacting Luciano, but only on condition that his client be moved closer to the city. On the 12th of May 1942, officially for administrative purposes, 9 prisoners were moved to a prison within easy reach of New York. Among them was Charles Lucky Luciano. Great Meadow Correctional Facility was known by criminals as the Country Club. In this more congenial environment, Luciano began the 6th year of his sentence.
He had a lot of time, did he? Archie, he had 40 to 60 years.
Oh, you were doing a big bit, sure.
A lot of time to life.
Yeah.
40 to 60 years to life is a long time.
Yeah, he was doing it. When we call it a bit, we always called a lot of time or whatever time. How big is your bit, And that was it.
Just 3 days after his arrival in the Country Club, he had unexpected visitors.
We walked into Lucky and he says, "What the hell are you guys doing here?" He was really surprised. So we explained to him the purpose of our mission, and he said, "Yes, I'll help."
The most powerful mafioso in America had agreed to cooperate with the US Navy. In the following months, a procession of New York's leading criminal figures visited Great Meadow.
I was assigned to take him from his cell up to the administration building in a special room where there was 3 or 4 strangers. And after getting to the room, I thought I was supposed to go in with him because he was an inmate. And they said, no, we don't need you, and to wait outside in the corridor.
No record was taken of who these visitors from the New York underworld were or what they discussed with Luciano. By now, naval intelligence depended on these public enemies.
They were public enemies, correct. Anyone who could make a contribution to help us was used. Whether it was Luciano, whether it was Bugsy Siegel, whether it was Costello, whether it was Maya Lansky, yes. Abies Willman, yes. Mike Lascar.
I just learned a secret. It's a honey, it's a pimp. But the enemy is listening, so I'll never let it slip. Because when I learn a secret, boy, I zipper up my lip.
Obsessively secret about the relationship with the Mafia, the Navy burnt all records of the affair, including Huffington's black notebooks that contained the names of his criminal contacts. Much of the detail of the conspiracy was lost. What is known is that naval intelligence encouraged the Mafia to take care of business on the waterfront. This unofficial police force included brutal enforcers from the Mafia's hit squad, Murder Incorporated. Through Luciano, the Navy was now linked to killers like Johnny Cockeye Dunn. An underworld source confirms that Dunn and a colleague murdered suspected German spies while working for the Navy.
There's a rumor that Dunn and Sullivan permanently murdered 2 people who were named as potential spies. What would your comments be on that?
No comment. No comment.
Casablanca. Here, meeting with the Allied High Command, President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill gave to Germany, Japan, and Italy 2 words: unconditional surrender.
After Casablanca, a new purpose emerged for the Luciano project.
Prelude to invasion. From 100 African bases, Allied bombers swarm across the Mediterranean, softening Italian island strong.
Allied success in North Africa made invasion of Europe imminent. The stepping stone was Sicily, on which intelligence was suddenly top priority. Huffington decided to press his Mafia contacts for information to assist the invasion. The secret pact was put to work on the front line in Europe. Its tentacles stretched to Sicily. On the say-so of Luciano, Sicilian Americans brought mementos and memories of home to Naval Intelligence headquarters. Tony Marslow acted as interpreter.
What I was interested in is, what photographs did they have? What relatives did they have in Italy? Where did they live? What did they do? That's what they supplied, those who could. Some were hostile. All I could say to them, one thing: this is where you've earned your bread. This is the country that gave you your home. You owe it. You owe it your life. Anything you can do that can save an American boy, help.
Did you not imagine that some of the people you were meeting in America were mafiosi, and that their relatives would be mafiosi back in Sicily?
I couldn't care less what they were, if they could supply any information that would help the war effort.
From the shores of North Africa, the United Nations High Command launches the greatest amphibious military operation in history, the invasion of Sicily.
The American authorities believed the Mafia could provide useful local intelligence once the Allies had landed. That policy was presented to the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Special military plan for psychological warfare in Sicily. Establish contact with clandestine groups, for example the Mafia, giving them every possible aid.
Now proceeding exactly according to plans perfected months in advance, a fleet of more than 3,000 ships nears the Sicilian coast.
Through Luciano, U.S. intelligence had been given the names of key mafiosi to contact after invasion. Men like Vito Genovese, formerly Luciano's right-hand man, hiding out in Italy on an American murder charge. And Don Calo Vizzini, still biding his time in Mussolini's Sicily. On the 10th of July 1943, the Allies landed.
American troops of General Patton's 7th Army move swiftly through western Sicily, taking town after town as they drive to join General Montgomery's British 8th Army. Through captured Tramini, Marsala, Trapani, Palermo, scenes are the same.
E il 14 di luglio, cioè 5 giorni dopo lo sbarco, 2 carri armati americani sono venuti per la strada che porta a Bellalba. Sono sceso precipitosamente, ho gridato ai miei paesani: arrivano gli americani, e siamo andati in goncio ai carri armati. Lungo la strada io mi sono munito di un manico di scopa e di una fodera di cuscino bianco, ho fatto una specie di bandiera bianca, sono andato in goncio ai carri armati alle porte del paese. E lì i carri armati che venivano avanti, da uno dei carri armati che veniva verso Bellalba, è uscita una cavernosa voce che diceva: chiamare Don Calo Vizzini! Chiamare Don Calo Vizzini! Si apre la torretta, arrivano i carri armati, Don Calo Vizzini con il suo nipote si mettono dentro il carro armato e vanno via, lasciandoci in asso, buttandoci a noi che eravamo andati incontro a loro pugni di caramelle e di sigarette. È andato via.
Sicily fell in 38 days. At the same time, the islands scattered around Sicily were liberated. On them were the penal colonies to which Mussolini had banished many of the mafiosi he had arrested. In a team that liberated them were members of American naval intelligence. The team was led by Captain Max Corvo.
We released all those people that were political prisoners. We didn't release anybody that was serving criminal time. The mafiosi were there because of criminal acts. We weren't bothered by them. Obviously, once the islands were liberated, they could find transportation to either the mainland or Sicily.
Within 2 months of the invasion, the Allies were forced to admit that some of the political prisoners released were in fact mafiosi. In the chaos after the invasion, order broke down. Looting and the black market were rife. It was fertile ground for the resurrected mafia. Responsibility for re-establishing law and order in Sicily fell to the Allied military government, AMGOT. AMGOT HQ for Western Sicily was on Piazza Pretoria in Palermo. For the first time in the war, there was a liberated country to administer. Liaising with Sicilian power brokers was the task of Colonel Charles Poletti, an ex-governor of New York.
We had no problem at all with the mafia. Nobody ever heard of it. There, while we were there, nobody heard of it, because it was obvious with the resources that the soldiers and army soldiers all around, they could do anything. There's no problem of it. Nobody ever even heard of it. Never even talked about it.
But one of AMGOT's chief intelligence sources remembers events differently. Joseph Russo headed the Palermo desk of the OSS, forerunner of the CIA.
When I got to Sicily and I took over, the first thing I did, I started looking for the malavita, the so-called the criminals, malavita, and it turned out they were mostly mafiosos.
They soon became the most valued political informers for the OSS.
And they liked my name and the fact that my father was born in Corleone, the hot seat for the mafia. But I got to know these people, the high mafiosos, and they were big. They got to be real big. And it didn't take them long to re-cement their solidarity as a gang. And I know every one of them.
collaborazione delle autorità militari inglesi. La generosa collaborazione.
The Mafia now exacted the price of the bargain sealed in New York, and it was the people of Sicily who would pay. The central task of Amgot after liberation was to recreate local government by appointing mayors to each town and village. In Villalba, Don Vizzini was about to return from obscurity.
Sapevano che era il capo della mafia siciliana e gli americani, rivolgendosi all'H Luciano, l'ammiraglio Effendel, rivolgendosi all'H Luciano, sapeva chi era l'H Luciano, e l'H Luciano aveva indirizzato a Don Calo, e gli americani lo sapevano che era Don Calo, e sapevano anche di che cosa era capace di fare in Sicilia.
On the 24th of July 1943, Don Calo Vizzini was appointed mayor of Villalba.
Quando Don Calo Vizzini è stato nominato sindaco del paese, nella piazza era radunata quasi tutta la popolazione, e questo tenente americano, rivolto alla popolazione, ha detto: questo essere vostro padrone.
And it wasn't just Villalba. One by one, the Mafia bosses came forward.
95% of them were mayors in the towns.
After the Allies arrived?
Yeah, they became mayors.
And who was responsible for that?
AMGOT, AMG, Allied Military Government. Paletti.
A man called Calogero Vizzini became a mayor in a town called Villalba, and that he was a mafioso. What would you say to that claim?
Never heard of it.
Were you responsible for appointing mayors?
My offices in my provinces appointed mayors. Where was this? Where was this?
In Villalba.
I don't know where Villalba is.
Were you ever aware of the possibility that there may be some mayors who were members of the Mafia?
No, none whatever. And I don't know where Villalba is either. Can't be a very important place. Never heard of it.
Villalba, a town of more than 4,000 inhabitants, was an important administrative center in one of the provinces under Paletti's control. And there were many other towns too.
Calogero Vizzini è diventato sindaco di Villalba, Salvatore Malta sindaco di Vallelonga, Gengo Russo soprintendente agli affari civili e militari di Mussolini, che quanto dire comandava il mezzo distretto. Don Calo e i suoi uomini sono venuti a trovarsi nella inconcepibile situazione di essere uomini di potere civile, amministrativo e militare, dove le libertà, anziché essere state conquistate con la fine della guerra in Sicilia, sono state soppresse ed eliminate.
At the town hall in Mazzara del Vallo, the meeting between an American Army captain, the mayor, the bishop, and chief of police is typical of how local authorities are working with the Allies.
With their newfound political legitimacy, the Mafia now wished to discuss the future.
I had a window and I looked out into the street through the iron gate, and I see this group. They pull up in a car, and the guard, the sentry, stops them, and he makes them all get out. And in Sicilian, he says to them, "What the do you want here?" In Sicilian, mind you. The boss man, Calogero Vizzini, they come into my office, they all sit down, and they started asking me what they could they expect as Sicilians, and what were we going to do about the goddamn communists. Better take that out. And I said we weren't going to do anything about the communists. They were our allies. Now then they looked at the doctor. Looked at me. He says, "Comandante, I don't believe you."
The Mafia was right. The enemy was changing. Having driven Mussolini from Sicily and knocked Italy out of the war, the Allies were determined to suppress the growing sympathy for communist ideals among Sicily's peasants. The three pillars of power in Sicily, the Catholic Church, the landowners, and the Mafia, were united in a hatred of communism. All had a vested interest in the old feudal system that the communists vowed to overthrow. The Mafia, whom Mussolini had outlawed as criminals, were now courted as political allies by the Americans. The OSS consolidated their Mafia links, using Sicilians with highly placed Mafia contacts. One man, named by the Italian Parliamentary Anti-Mafia Commission as having such contacts, was Captain Vito Guarassi. Guarassi admits that he knew and worked with the OSS, including Joe Russo and his colleague Vincent Scamporino.
L'OSS aveva parecchie persone, delle quali alcune molto abili. Scamporino, Russo, Corvo, fecero tutto il possibile per stabilire un clima di informazione e di collaborazione.
Quindi non è mai stato discusso l'argomento mafia tra lei e Scamporino?
Non è stato discusso, non ce ne siamo accorti. Può darsi che ci sia stato, è un sottofondo che ci è sfuggito, è segno che loro non hanno su questo fatto alcuna confidenza.
But in a letter written to the American ambassador in Rome, the US consul in Sicily refers to reports of a meeting of Mafia leaders at the Palermo home of Vito Guarassi. Present, according to the letter, were Mafia bosses from the three provinces of western Sicily.
Nego recisamente che ciò sia avvenuto, non ho avuto mai riunioni in casa mia, quindi può darsi che ci sia stata una riunione altrove, ma non a casa mia, e quindi non ho visto riunite questa persona. Naturalmente ho conosciuto Calogero Vizzini, non ho conosciuto Bruno, ho conosciuto Cottone perché era un distinto signore di Alcamo e la mia famiglia è di origine alcamese, ma non in casa mia, né l'ho invitato per queste ragioni.
Did Guarassi help you contact Mafia figures?
No. He was a straight-laced lawyer.
We have some documents saying that Mafia figures met in Guarassi's house.
You do?
Do you know what Guarassi was doing in North Africa in September 1943 with Scamporino?
Yeah. That's Scamporino's business.
Were they talking about the Mafia?
Not really, as far as I know. I don't want to pursue that any further because he's still alive, Guarassi. He had a wonderful family.
The measure of how close the relationship had become is clear from an OSS memo on the real Sicilian political situation, dated February the 23rd, 1944.
Today, better than ever before, the Mafia is taking an active part in the political life of the island. It wants to adhere with perfect loyalty and in a secret way to the political wishes of the U.S.
In February 1944, the first American consulate in liberated Europe was established in Sicily. The consul, Alfred Nestor, depended on the OSS for his intelligence. The OSS, in turn, relied on the Mafia. These views of the Mafia were passed directly back to the State Department in Washington. A system of code names was developed. Daddy was the consul, Alfred Nestor. Bullfrog was none other than Sicilian Mafia chief Don Vizzini, and Mr. X was their OSS go-between, Joseph Russo.
How often did I meet with them? With the Mafia bosses? At least once a month. And then the reason they came to see me, I guess they were looking for moral support more than anything else. And tires, car tires, automobile tires. Finally, they got around to, they needed automobile tires to get around, to do their good work, their beneficence. And whatever that was, I never bothered to find out.
In September 1944, the Mafia began a new war to destroy their political opposition. A campaign of murder and intimidation intensified. A lone American had sounded a warning. Only 3 months after the landings, W.E. Scotton, an army captain with diplomatic experience in Italy, submitted a report to Amgot entitled The Problem of the Mafia in Sicily.
There has been a strong resurgence of the Mafia since the occupation of Sicily. It has grave implication in the present and future. There would appear to be 3 courses open. A, direct, stringent, and prompt action to bring the Mafia under control. B, a negotiated truce with Mafia leaders. C, abandonment of any attempt to control Mafia. The third course is the course of least resistance. It may well mean the abandonment of the island to criminal rule for a long time to come. On the other hand, its chance of success is certain.
Scotton's prophecy was coming true. The terror reached its height on May the 1st, 1947. Portella della Ginestra became infamous as the site of Sicily's first political massacre.
Tutti gli anni si faceva quella festa, un giorno di divertimento, pacifica, e stavano attenti a sentire qualche cosa. In questo frattempo si sono messi a sparare, hanno svogliato il tiro e abbiamo creduto di essere mortaretti della festa. Intanto poi le palotte hanno cascato davanti a noi e allora si è pensato che la cosa era un po' brutta e la gente cominciando a gridare, a sentirsi, a buttarsi per terra, a scappare e nello stesso tempo hanno seguito di sparare e hanno colpito che sono stati morti e feriti. Una che vuole a circa 20 metri da me a cavallo, hanno colpito il cavallo e cade per terra assieme con la signora e sono morti sia come il cavallo e anche la signora.
Each stone at Portella represents a victim of the Mafia. The inscription reads, "Here, on men, women and children, the lead of the Mafia and the landowners fell down like rain."
Male, sentire a vedere quelle stragi, quella gente, quel sangue per terra che si vedeva, era molto malissimo. Quando uno vedeva un padre portare il proprio figlio così fino al paese, chi la incontrava per stare, nessuno lo poteva consolare, perché un figlio è un figlio.
The war changed everything for the Sicilian Mafia. A criminal organization found itself with political power. It has defended it ruthlessly. Judges Falcone and Borsellino are the latest in a long line of political assassinations, the Mafia's illustrious corpses.
I feel guilt in the sense that Italy could not create a government which could control its own people. But what happened to those men is not the fault of our invasion or the defeat of Italy. It's the fault of 54 governments who lacked the will and the ability to stop the Mafia.
the most heavily guarded man in Italy, Leoluca Orlando, has come to honor his colleagues who have died. He knows he too could join them.
I don't know what does it mean to walk alone. I don't know what does it mean to go in a bar, in a coffee house, to speak with friends without bodyguards. I change every night the place where I sleep. I sleep in military buildings, all around the soldiers, defending my home, defending myself. I have been for many years a man at risk. Now I am a man in danger. My life is something like a run against the time, because we must run to change political system. Because only when we will change political system, a man as I probably will risk less, will be less in danger.
Andiamo in guerra, andiamo a combattere, basta più stare zitti ora basta, siamo stanchi di piangere a Palermo, siamo stanchi di piangere a Palermo, basta ora popolo palermitani, svegliamoci ora, siamo stanchi!
For thousands of war-weary Sicilians, the coming of United Nations forces means freedom from fascism. For youngsters riding aboard the Army's famous Jeep, it's the dawn of a new day.
There's nothing I can say about it, other than that it's too damn bad it happened. We didn't do our job. I'll tell you that much.
One day I will be killed. Be sure I will not be killed only by the mafia. I will be killed by all the politics defending the mafia. The military hand will be the mafia, but the mind will be a political mind.